Hey everybody, it's Lindsay and I'm back today to share with you the set of bookmarks that I made. So I am starting off today with 6 strips of cardstock that all measure the exact same length. They are 2.5 inches across by 5.5 inches tall. Now I'm doing 6 today. I thought that was a nice round number for a set of bookmarks. However, you can make as many or as little of these as you want to. So to start off with, I'm just going to take 2 of these at a time, and I'm using my Tim Holtz ruler to mark 1 inch down from the very top. I'm making a straight line all the way across because I need it on both sides. And then I will also measure right in the center of each bookmark. So right in the top of the center of the bookmark, I'll go ahead and make a mark right at about 1 1/4. I'll do this on each set of the bookmarks, so I'll go ahead and show you one more. And I am doing 2 of these at a time. I have one behind the other, and that is because my paper trimmer can handle 2 sheets of cardstock at a time. Now, if your paper trimmer can handle more, you could by all means do more, or you could just do 1 at a time if your paper trimmer can't handle more than 1 piece of cardstock. I'll go ahead and put this final line right in the center at the very top, and then I'm going to move on to trimming these. I want my bookmarks to have a pointed top, so I'm just going to put these into my paper trimmer. I'm going to line up those 2 marks that I made, one on the top and one on the side, and I will just cut these off right at an angle, and this is going to allow me to have an angle on both sides of the top of my bookmark to make a nice point, but this way I know they're going to be the exact same on all of the bookmarks, so these are all going to match up. I'll go ahead and show you one more time what I do here. I just take my set, so I have 2 pieces of cardstock here. It's just a little bit quicker for me to cut 2 at a time. I'll put this down into my paper trimmer, and using my wire guide, I'm just going to line up the top pencil mark and the one on the side, and then I'll just trim that right off at an angle. I'll go ahead and flip it around to the other side, line up again those 2 pencil marks with my wire guide, and then I will just slice off that little corner. Now before I move on to any of the stamping or coloring, I need to go ahead and erase all my pencil marks. You don't want to do any stamping or coloring over this because your pencil marks will get trapped underneath that color and you won't be able to erase them. So make sure right after you're finished cutting, you just go ahead and erase all of those lines. So for my first bookmark design, I'm going to use this brand new set from Two Paper Divas. It is called Afternoon Tea, and this is the set that inspired the entire bookmarks. I love the little stack of books on this with the little teacup or coffee, whatever you want to make it, that's right on top. I've been wanting to make a set of bookmarks for a while. However, I just didn't have that perfect little stamp that I thought really went well with the bookmark theme. Then I got this one, and I was like, oh yeah, so now we can make them. So I'm just lining this up in my MISTI, and a little hint, if you have trouble lining up your stamp about which way you think it should go and about how it should be sitting on your paper, use the back of that stamp. Most of the time they have a little image, black image on there, and sometimes that'll help you get the placement just right on your paper. So for this bookmark, because I'm going to be coloring in those images, I'm going to go ahead and use Memento ink to stamp this image down. Now, again, you can color these in however you want. I'm going to be using alcohol markers, so I'm using this Memento ink, but use whatever black ink corresponds with your coloring medium that you want to use. So I'll just go ahead and ink that stamp up, flip the lid of my MISTI over, and stamp that right down onto that bookmark. And I have centered this in the top portion of the bookmark because I'm going to stamp a sentiment underneath. Now to get this nice rich black color from Memento ink, I do usually double stamp my images, and that one's ready to be colored now. Now for my next stamp, for my next bookmark, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. So on this particular bookmark, I'm going to use Be the Reason. This is another little sentiment set. This is from Two Paper Divas, and I have just lined that up in the center of my bookmark because this is going to be the only thing stamped on this particular bookmark. I'm going to use this little Memento Dewdrop ink pad. This is in Sweet Plum, and it's a purple color, and I'm just going to ink up this stamp, and then I'll go ahead and stamp this right down. Now, when making a set of these bookmarks, I would highly suggest doing a few simple ones like this, just because this can become really time consuming. So just throwing in a little bit of these sentiment bookmarks where all it is a stamped larger sentiment really helps save some time on these. So I did double stamp this just to get a nice rich purple color, and then that bookmark is completely done other than putting a backing on it, and I'll show that a little bit later in the video. Now for this one I am using Bamboo Leaves. It's a Memento Dewdrop as well, and I am using another stamp set from Two Paper Divas. It's one of their larger sentiment sets, and it is called Dream Big. So I just inked that up. I centered this again in the very center of my bookmark, and I just stamped that right down. And then I'll go ahead and ink this up again, and then I'll stamp it right back down, and I know it will exactly line up because I'm using my Misty, but this is just going to darken up that ink for me. And again, this bookmark is done except for the backing. So for my last two bookmarks, I'm going to be using the Seeds of Hope stamp set, again from Two Paper Divas, and I just have taken this little flower container flower pot, and I am inking this up with Memento ink, and I will stamp this in the center a little bit, but more towards the top, because again I'm going to be stamping sentiments underneath this, and I'll just go ahead and stamp that right down. I have moved to an acrylic block at this point just because I'm going to be doing some masking, and it's a little bit easier for me to line things up when I'm doing this and to switch stamps more quickly. So in this set there are these little picks that go in the pots that will hold the names of the flowers that are in there. So I'll go ahead and stamp both of those, and I have masked off the flower pots. I have used this set before, so I already had masks cut out. That's why I always save my masks. But you can see these have been stamped on repeatedly, so they're a little dirty, but they still work, they still stick, so I'm going to use them. I went ahead and masked off both of those little picks, and then I'm just going to choose two little flowers from the stamp set and stamp those in either one of the flower pots. So I started off with the lavender flower, and then I'm just going to go ahead and clean that off, put that back on its backing sheet, and then I will move on to this rosemary stamp. And again, I'm just mounting this onto an acrylic block just to make it a little bit quicker. Another little tip when making these bookmarks, I made a set of 6, so for each 2 of these, I'm making them pretty similar, if not identical. On the first 2, I did identical. The second 2, I did both large sentiments. Now here, I am using both little flower pots, and that just helps keep a cohesive look across the entire set. Now underneath both of these little flower pots, I'm going to stamp some sentiments from this set. This first one says Plant Seeds of Hope, and then another one, the next one I'm going to stamp, says All Things Grow with Love. Now these aren't really bookmark sentiments, however, they do work with the images on there, and they're kind of uplifting messages, so they really do work for a bookmark. In each one of the little picks, I went ahead and stamped their names that correspond with the little plants, and then I'm moving on to coloring. Now for my coloring, I'm using my alcohol markers, which are the Dick Blick Studio brush markers, and I am kind of going with the more vintage feel here. So what I mean by that is I'm going for really dark colors, and instead of doing whites, I'm doing ivories and things like that. So you can see I started off using ivories for that cup, and then I used some really dark greens and plums to fill in that little plant on the top of the cup. Now for each of the books, I'm going to be doing the exact same coloring on both bookmarks, so they will be identical. I'm going to go ahead and do a very dark green book on the bottom, very bottom book, and then I did a little bit of a maroon label on it. And then I'll go ahead and move on to the next one, and I'm going to be using some very dark blues for this. So you can see I'm keeping my colors very dark, very rich, and this is really going to help them pop off that white cardstock as well. I'll move on, and just to bring around that maroon color that I used on the label on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and bring that to the entire book on the top. I'm adding a little bit of shading for a shadow under the cup, and then I'm using ivory on the label. You can see I've kept all of these colors very brown toned, I guess you could say, and then I've also carried them across the entire image. So I used ivory in a few places, I used my maroons in a few places, and that just really helps give it a more cohesive feel. Now for the flower pots, I'm doing terracotta flower pots, so I'll just use a few orangish brown colors for this. And I just added a bit of shading around the edges, and then I'm just going to color these plants like they would traditionally be colored. So I'm doing purple for the lavender, green for the leaves, and then for the little picks, I decided to go with wooden picks to keep with, again, the brown feel on these cards. So I just carried those colors from one bookmark to the next. I also added a bit of shadow underneath both the flower pots as well as the books, just to give those a little bit of a grounding effect as well. And that will complete all the coloring on those bookmarks. Here I will give you a nice close-up of each one, and then you can see those, all they are sentiments, so they are ready to go. However, you can see I still used purples, or it's plum I guess, and also green on those for the sentiments. So I really thought about that before I colored my images. Now because I used alcohol markers on 4 of my bookmarks, they had bleed through on the back. And so what I decided to do to cover that up, and you don't have to do this, you could by all means leave them with the bleed through on the back and that's just fine. I wanted to cover it up though. So I just took some bits of pattern paper and I used all of the pattern papers. They came from the same pack of 6x6 pattern papers, and that just assures me that they kind of go together and they match without putting too much thought into it. I cut them all to 2.5 inches by 5 inches, the same size I started off with for my bookmarks, and then I'm just going to add some double-sided adhesive to the back side of the white colored part. I am using the 1/4 inch iCraft double-sided adhesive, and because this is tearaway, this really just makes it go a little bit quicker when doing every single one of these bookmarks. I also did do the sentiment bookmarks because I wanted them all to have the same look. So I'll go ahead and peel the backing paper off of this double-sided adhesive on this first bookmark, and then I'm just going to flip it over and lay this onto the pattern paper. Now I didn't want to put this on a whole 6x6 sheet of paper and then have to trim around the entire bookmark. So starting out with a 2.5 inch by 5.5 inch sheet or strip of cardstock, that just assures me that it's going to match on all sides. The only thing I need to do is trim off those 2 little corners. So it's really a piece of cake. And I just use my long blade Fisker scissors for this because the longer the blade, the cleaner the cut is going to be. I also had just a little bit of overhang on some of these, and these long blade scissors make it a snap just to trim off that little bit of extra so none peeks through on the other side. To make these a little bit sturdier, I am going to go ahead and laminate my bookmarks. I have these laminated pouches. They're from Scotch 3M, and these are the 8.5 by 11. I also have them in a photo size, but an 8.5 by 11 sheet allowed me to put them all in together, and then I just had to run it through my laminator. Now you can pick these laminating pouches up just about anywhere. I got mine at Target if that is helpful, but I'm just going to start laying these in there. You want to make sure that you do leave a little bit of space between each one, because when you cut these out you want to leave like a 1/4 inch border around them, and that's just going to make sure that they stay sealed tight and that the lamination doesn't come apart. So I'll go ahead and put these all in here, and then I can just stick the last little 2 right on the bottom, and that's going to go ahead and allow me to laminate these all at one time. The trick to getting these through your laminator is to hold the opposite end that isn't running through your laminator. So I'll go ahead and start this. I've got my laminator heated up. This is just a very cheap one that I have here. It's the 9-inch Royal Sovereign laminator, and I do have it linked on my blog. However, I always link to Simon Says Stamp, and the majority of the time they are not the cheapest place to buy this, so I would suggest doing a quick Google search before you purchase anything, just to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck and you're getting the best price possible. So I ran those through my laminator and trimmed those out. Again, I said to leave a 1/4 inch border around them just to make sure your lamination stays sealed. And then I'm just using a very cheap hole punch. This is from the office section at Target. And I'm just going to put a little hole at the top center of each of those little points on the bookmark. Through that hole, I'm going to go ahead and loop some grosgrain ribbon through there for a nice little tassel-like effect on these bookmarks. I am just going to take each one of my ribbons, and how I do it is I go ahead and fold it in half, and then the two ends of the ribbon I go ahead and stick right through the front to back on these little bookmarks. Now that leaves a loop in the front that I can stick the ribbon ends through, and then I pull it tight and I am left with a nice little tassel on the top. I did trim off the top of the ribbon on each one of the bookmarks just to make it a little bit shorter, and that finished off this complete set. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this long video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you too make a set of bookmarks as well. As always, I will leave you with this close-up and just a few pictures. For more information and the supply list, you can head to my blog, craftingwhilecaffeinated.wordpress.com. The link is in the description box below, as well as that I in the top right-hand corner. That will get you there too. Thank you guys so much for watching, and happy crafting.